Welcome to Season 4, Episode 13 of the Outlap F1 podcast. This is the Imola Grand Prix race review. We are part of the Ship It Studios podcast network. I am your host, James, along with my wonderful co-hosts, Andy and Deanna. John is out this evening. Andy, we'll start with you. How you doing today, sir?
Not too bad. Not the most drag-out, knockout race, but still fun. I think overall a pretty fun weekend, and I'm pleasantly surprised with the result.
Deanna, how you doing?
Yeah, I think overall an interesting race weekend. I think it was just kind of elongated, and there was a lot of stuff that happened, but over a few different sessions that I think at the time kind of seemed to be slower in bits. But I think overall a pretty interesting weekend. A lot of changes, I think, kind of in the championship. It's looking a lot better for Red Bull and Max now. So, yeah, love to see it.
I'm sure it's not hard to make things interesting when you've got like 16 screens in front of you and every possible onboard. If you haven't seen Deanna's new setup that she put on Twitter, you need to go check it out. It is ridiculous. And by ridiculous, I mean amazing. And I'm in love with it.
I can only get 8 onboards, but I'm trying to figure out how to get up to 20.
I'm sure you'll get there.
Her alter ego is she's an air traffic controller.
That's what my dad did. That's what my dad did. So I learned for the best.
She's used to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, you should see the setup that he has he does flight sim stuff. And so he has like all of the whatever it's called. And like he has a 3D printer. So he's 3D printed parts for like all of these like levers and gears and like all of this stuff. And so I get all of it from him. My mom hates it.
I've seen like a lot of the F1 like simulator setups, but for some reason on my Twitter I've been getting more and more pictures come through of like that people have that aircraft simulator setups, and it's
wild.
Intense. Some of the stuff people have it's pretty wild. It's a very expensive hobby from what I understand.
Every time I go home, he has a new attachment of some sort, I feel like.
That's awesome. And now we see where you get it from.
Yep.
So it all makes sense. It all comes full circle.
It's going to say the genes are strong in the Deanna family over there.
All right, so we do have a race to talk about, but before we get into that, I have to remind everybody you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and YouTube at Outlet F1 Podcast. Of course, you can check out our link tree on our Twitter profile page. Do us a solid. Click like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or click the 5-star button if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really goes a long way. You can email the show at chatnow@outletf1.com. Looks like we have quite a few emails again tonight, so make sure you keep doing that. Our website, www.outletf1.com, which will be guaranteed to be updated by tomorrow morning. So when you go look to see what the next race is, it won't say Bahrain or whatever it is anymore. It'll say... I
still maintain that is so true. It's a true statement. It's over. And the website is correct about that.
It is over. Thanks, Andy. I'm going to bring you with me to work anytime I'm in a dispute or something. It's like, Andy's got my back here. Of course, if you're new to the sport of F1, surprisingly, much like my in-laws who were calling me today and asking me F1 questions, which literally came out of nowhere. So that was kind of an interesting phone call to receive and questions to get. But you can check out our F1 for Beginners episode on episode 4 of this season. We do one every year at the beginning of the season. Kind of brings you soup to nuts. Kind of catches you up on everything you may have missed from the season before and what to expect in the season to come. So make sure you check that out. Of course, you can check out Relapped with Deanna for her Imola reaction. It's a great time. With that setup, she can easily land small airplanes at JFK in her spare time, which now we find out she might be doing that too. Maybe it'll be a flight simulator soon enough. And then we have Outlap F1 Nation stepping up. Andy, take it away.
Yeah, we have another member of the hashtag Outlap F1 Nation. Congratulations to Lori Dolchester. Thank you so much. Again, every time we get one of these, I get super just this odd, amazing. So I'm so happy to see that happening. And you join such distinct and wonderful people as Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Cody Walsh, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, Mary Brown, Jonathan Scott, and Matt Polanski from the Red Sector MotoGP podcast. MotoGP had quite the rain-filled session in Portugal this weekend, and our U.S. rider actually got a Moto2 win. Congrats to Joe Roberts.
Hell yeah. If you want to help promote the show as well, you can find the link in our show notes. It's through Anchor, and you can donate whatever you can. All goes right back into the show, so thank you for all of those donations. And we have a new sponsor this week. It's Athletic Greens. Make sure you go check them out at www.athleticgreens.com/emerging. And then, of course, you can still check out Manscaped. Use code OUTLAP, OUTLAP, all one word, for 20% off and free shipping. And shout out to our boy Vincenzo. Make sure you check out the F1guy.com and see some of the cool F1 swag he's got out. Pretty sure he's got some Miami stuff, so make sure you check that out. But now we can get into some F1 from this weekend, and for that, we'll go to headline of the day. Andy, you go ahead.
So my main headline is it's the championship race is resurrected. Red Bull Racing with a big hit back this weekend puts the Ferraris back under pressure. And this weekend was, I thought, the first real chink in the armor for one Charles Leclerc. It's still his to lose, but it's a lot tighter now. And then my other headline is I have finally cracked the code on how to tighten this championship up. Whoever is the contender, I just need to start picking them to win every race in my predictions, put them all in my fantasy league, because apparently I just can't have nice things. So I'm just going to use that power for good, and we'll get this thing to Abu Dhabi that way.
Interesting strategy. Deanna, what do you got for your headline of the day?
Mine is basically exactly the same, but it's the championship is back on. I think the constructors are separated by around 11 points or so. Verstappen's about 28 points behind. Had a perfect weekend this weekend. So very similar to the dominance that Leclerc had in Australia. So I think it might be kind of track specific as we go along. So I'm just excited to see the two of them kind of still go at it. So hopefully Red Bull has truly resolved their reliability issues and that doesn't get too much in the way going forward. But yeah, I think first mistake for Leclerc, but for the most part, Leclerc, Verstappen kind of top of their game through these first few races, which is kind of awesome to see. And it is definitely feels even more so than last year, that changing of the guard, which is cool.
Yeah, very cool. John put one in there. He says, did they forget to notify the new race director that it's his job to initiate DRS? I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later. My headline, simply heartbreak for the Tifosi. Went back to the motherland in Italy this weekend, and yet just a terrible, terrible weekend for Ferrari, with signs going out pretty much as early as you can possibly go out of a race. And Charles, as we mentioned, but we'll get more into that as we break down the race. Before we get into the sprint and Sunday's race, we are going to talk about qualifying first. And Andy, that is your specialty, so I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, so way back on Friday, which feels like forever and a day ago, given the nature of this weekend, we did have the qualifying session. It was in mixed conditions, so some of the lap times were quicker in earlier sessions than the final one, but not setting a time and having a bit of a brake explosion was one Alexander Albon, so he did not set a lap time and therefore was not classified in the qualifying. P19 was Esteban Ocon. He ended up having some reliability issues and was only able to set one flying lap in Q1 and was not able to get back out at the end of that session when the track conditions were improving. P18 was Nicholas Latifi. P17, Pierre Gasly. P16, Yuki Tsunoda. P15, he makes it. We did it again. We all said he wasn't going to do it, and look what happened. P15, Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. P14 was Joe Granu. P13, bit of a shocker here, Lewis Hamilton. P12, Mick Schumacher. P11, another big surprise here, also a streak breaker, George Russell in the other Mercedes, meaning we had no Mercedes in Q3 for the first time since 2012. Yow. In P10 was Carlos Sainz. P9 was Sebastian Vettel. P8 was Valtteri Bottas. P7, Sergio Perez. P6 was Daniel Ricciardo. P5 was Fernando Alonso. P4 was Kevin Magnussen. P3 was Lando Norris. P2 was Charles Leclerc. And in P1, with a final lap time in Q3 of 1:27.999, was Max Verstappen.
Thank you, Andy. Deanna, any talking points out of qualifying you want to get through?
Oh gosh, let's see. I have a ton of notes. I haven't looked at them in a couple days here, but yeah, I think it was overall an interesting session. I think 5 red flags total. So a lot of just kind of broken up running, especially in Q2 and Q3. So I think had it been a clear run, that definitely would have been a very different grid. But I loved that for, at least for the sprint race. I don't know if I would have probably preferred it for the actual race, but the mixed up grid that we got because of that was pretty cool. And then just to kind of see Norris again kind of taking advantage of that kind of conditions. He tends to do well then. He was probably the highlight for me for sure.
Yeah, I enjoyed having to pay that much attention to Lewis Hamilton in Q1 to make it out. I what was it, 4 1,000ths of a
Four
second?
100ths, or 4 1,000ths over Yuki there.
Yeah, that was close. And then coming into the race weekend, I was wondering if we would see a double non-points finish for Mercedes, but thank goodness for George Hamilton, huh? Or George Hamilton, George Russell.
They've just morphed into one. That's what's going on.
They've combined their powers into one.
They can only have one car score points.
And it's Russell. I think he's the only driver to be in the top 5 every race now.
Yep,
it's pretty impressive. All right, so if we can move on from qualifying, we'll go right into the sprint results. Andy, you want to take this one too?
I'll give it a shot. I hope my voice holds out for this one. Not being classified, he went out on a lap. One incident in the sprint was Joe Granu, so he ended up basically starting from the pit lane. P19, Nicholas Latifi. P18, Alex Albon. P17, Pierre Gasly. P16, Esteban Ocon. P15 was Lance Stroll. P14 was Lewis Hamilton. P13 was Sebastian Vettel. P12 was Yuki Tsunoda. P11, George Russell. P10 was Mick Schumacher, so highest starting grid position for him. P9 was Fernando Alonso. P8 was Kevin Magnussen. He ended up starting pretty much on the wrong tire and moved back. P7, don't forget about him, Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. P6 was Daniel Ricciardo. P5 was Lando Norris. P4 was Carlos Sainz, so good recovery drive considering where the qualifying was for him in the sprint. P3 was Sergio Checo Perez. P2 was Charles Leclerc, and in P1, he had to fight for it, but it was ultimately Max Verstappen.
I thank you, Andy. Deanna, sprint race. What did you think about it overall? And a couple talking points.
I think start to finish that this was the best one. Well, no. Yes, because I feel like in Brazil it was just Hamilton, where I think this one was kind of all over the place. But again, I think that's because we got a grid that was out of place. So you had Sainz coming from 10th, you had Perez coming from 7th. So I think that still kind of starts to turn the wheels of do we do a reverse grid kind of situation, because that's a lot of the times what's making it exciting. It was great though that we also had the change of the lead on the last lap or second to last lap. So I think that really just kind of sealed it. I will have to say, I think going into it, sprint races, I thought if this one was like a dud, then maybe we'd start to see kind of that conversation shift a little bit more. But I think after you have another positive one like this one, F1's not going to be in any kind of rush to get rid of it. But I don't know. I just don't think if we're going to start to get more of these, I'm still not convinced on this format. I'm still not convinced that I think I like just having whoever's on pole still start from the front of the grid. Like, I feel like I'd like it to be kind of a more separate thing that's going on. But I do love the weekend format. It's just the actual format of the race itself that I'm not in love with.
Fair enough. Sorry. Andy, what were you as high on the sprint race as Deanna was?
In terms of pure entertainment value, in and of itself, this race was actually really fun. I was thoroughly entertained up and down. I even watched it a second time because I wanted to make sure I got everything out of it, which I've never done with any of the other sprints before. So, yeah, I mean, it's fun. I feel like these sprints are kind of like, I think I was putting it on Twitter, like they're like cinnamon. They can be great and they can like put a dish over the top if you do it right and you sprinkle it in. But if you do too much of it, then suddenly it doesn't taste so good. And that's all you taste. So I can see just from hearing comments of commentators throughout the rest of the weekend that F1 is high on this format. They want to push it. They definitely want to get more and more venues involved with it. Just be careful. It worked here. It's not guaranteed to necessarily work everywhere else. And the weather helped a lot. They got really bailed out, I think, by the fact that Friday and Sunday were wet.
Oh, for sure. And I feel like one of the arguments I always see is that it's basically you're seeing all the overtakes that would happen on Sunday happen on Saturday. And I do think that there was some of that this weekend. I think when you got kind of towards the later stages of this race, it was very much everybody was where they were going to be. And especially the top like 6 or 7, there were like about 10 seconds between almost all of them. So they were just like the gaps are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I feel like I do feel like the actual sprint race was better because we were on like full dry conditions from the start, whereas starting on inters and then doing the whole DRS shenanigans today as well, that kind of hampered some of that action in the beginning. But I don't know. I do feel like it did kind of sort itself out, and all that excitement we would have seen today did get done early.
Yeah, I'm pretty much there with you guys. I enjoyed the race overall. I was entertained. I was on the edge of my seat, hoping that Leclerc could hang on there. The fact that he couldn't really pull away from Max kind of had me some doubts creeping in the back of my head a little bit. And then when they started bringing up the green to the tires, I did not have a good feeling. But I didn't want him fighting to maintain that first place. Give up a point on Saturday to secure the maximum points on Sunday was kind of my mindset going in. The start that Leclerc had was just awesome. Couldn't have asked for a better one because I didn't really want him fighting going into the first couple turns to try and get first place. It's just like chill in second, get the 7 points, and let's move on. But with that kind of start, I thought things were looking good. But me, normally I start with Charles Leclerc on my why can't I think of the name of the onboard? But I can't watch like 8 of them at the same time like Deanna can. So I usually do one at a time. This weekend I decided to go with Sainz because I was really mostly excited for him going into that race to see what he could do coming from behind with a better car. And he thoroughly impressed me. Like I don't think I could have asked for anything more than 4th place. It would have had to have taken a mistake from one of the top guys for that to happen, especially with Sergio starting a few places in front of him and also doing a really good job to get up to 3rd. So both second drivers of the top 2 teams are really doing their thing, at least going into Sunday. So that's good to see. And I think it bodes well for the battle between Ferrari and Red Bull as the season progresses, because I think Checo and Carlos Sainz are both very strong. Just one of them super unlucky right now, it seems like. So if nothing else from the sprint, we can go ahead and move into the race on Sunday. All right. So we're going to talk about back markers first, which includes one of my favorite back marker drivers. But we have 2 non-finishers. That's Carlos Sainz and Fernando Alonso. And then we had Danny Ricciardo in 18th place. Bad day, bad weekend for him. Mick Schumacher in 17th. Nicholas Latifi in 16th. Zhou Guan Yu in 15th. Esteban Ocon in 14th. And my boy, Lewis Hamilton in 13th place. Ouch. Andy, what are your takeaways from the back markers?
Well, I mean, we could talk about the Sainz and Ricciardo thing first, because I think that was the first part of the race and the first, 400 or 500 meters. And that was basically the end of both of those guys' actual race. Sainz on the outside did not do anything wrong. Ricciardo on the inside, not really anywhere to go. But if you're going to give fault, it's definitely more Daniel than Carlos in that. He did get up on the white paint. That just forced the car to go wide, and he hits Carlos, and Carlos spins around, beaches it in the gravel. Daniel keeps going, but apparently was also then hit from behind, which knocked out the diffuser, and that screwed his race, basically. He did get back into at least the runners a little bit with being the first car to go onto slick tires. That got him up to P15. They tried another attempt at going really long on a set of hard tires. That did not work. It was too cold. Those tires never fired up, and that was basically the end of his day. I've seen a lot of screaming and yelling on social media about Daniel Ricciardo. My critique of the move would be, you don't need to hit a 5-run home run on that lap, and even if you manage to pull it off, you're not keeping that position. So just don't push it quite that hard. Know where you are on the track.
Yeah, and when it is. Like I was texting you talking a little bit of shit about Danny Ricciardo, but at the end of the day, I can't really blame him too much. It just sucks that it's Sainz again. Not that I wanted it to be Leclerc by any means, but he's snake bit right now. I think once the results start to come, they're going to be flooding all in. But just a super unlucky day. And
we got to get him a clean weekend.
Yeah.
Ferrari's got to get him a clean weekend. Somebody's got to give that guy a clean weekend.
Yeah.
Now, the only critique that I would put on Sainz is he did not have the world's greatest start. So part of that is due to the launch. But again, I mean, where he was positioned, he's no fault of his to have that happen.
Well, the one fault of his is, I think, pushing maybe just a touch too hard on that second run in Q2 and putting it in the wall to put himself in P10. And then P4, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
Fair. And then Alonso, so I think they showed it again. I don't remember. Did they ever show what happened to his side pod? Was that from Schumacher when he spun? Is that who hit him?
It was from that originally, and then when Hamilton was basically like side drafting him, the downforce or whatever goes away from that side pod and just ripped it right off.
Okay. Then besides that, Latifi finished a race, so that's really good for him. So that's a positive. Schumacher, not a great day. He was spinning a little bit, but that's what happens when your mentor is Sebastian Vettel, so you should probably think about it. Zhou Guan Yu, quiet day. And then Ocon, I'd say the same. Does anybody have anything on Ocon's day?
I mean, he finished, I think, P11 on the road, and dropped all the way to 14th with that 5-second penalty for unsafe release. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, honestly, up to 11th from starting 19th because he had that issue in qualifying and couldn't go for a second run. So I think I kind of halfway decent recovery, and then that penalty was just a little bit unfortunate for him, at least.
I mean, I think this track highlights the importance of track position and how much of a hill it is to climb. And if you have the high ground, how much better off and how much more mistakes and more freedom you have. A lot of these guys aren't really all that much off the pace. Ocon's got a respectable car. He was coming from the back. Alonso not finishing is a freak thing. Mick Schumacher, just a tough day in the wet. And I think it was more learning than anything else. But I mean, it's just so hard. I mean, let's talk a little bit about Hamilton and the 18 attempts he had on Pierre Gasly that never got completed. It's not because the Mercedes car is that bad. It's not great. It's not good. But if it's 1 or 2 tenths, and if you find yourself caught back there, doesn't matter who you are, except if you're maybe in a Ferrari right now or a Red Bull, you're going to get in that quagmire of the back markers. You got to stay out of it by qualifying better. It's just that simple.
Now, so let's talk about Lewis Hamilton for a minute. Do either one of you think that they should have maybe rolled the dice with him and brought him in earlier to go on to slicks, even though he was pushing back on the team radio that he didn't think it was time yet? What other way would he have gotten out of that quagmire, like you said?
I mean, he got really unlucky with that Ocon penalty because had they waited, he would have gone ahead of Ocon and then come out about P11. But because of that, and he came out behind Ocon, and then at that time is when Gasly came up, and then while he's warming his tires up, Albon passed him as well. So in that one little incident, that dropped him from 11th to 14th, and then just got trapped behind the two of behind Gasly and Albon for the rest of the race. So I think there was kind of like a touch of luck in there. But yeah, I mean, maybe pit a lap earlier just because he got undercut by the other guys, but I don't know that there's anything really that they could have done. Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't want to make somebody come in and go from inters to slicks if the driver is not bought into that.
Yeah,
you got to make sure that driver's got confidence that he's going to be able to fire up those tires, which was the Mercedes bugaboo this entire weekend, was they could not get those tires to fire unless it was 3, 4, 5 laps in. If you actually look at the most irrelevant session of the weekend, which is FP2, Mercedes were doing really well on longer runs. So they could actually get temperature in the tires eventually. It just wasn't fast enough in these types of conditions when it was cold and wet. And so, yeah, I wouldn't have put him on slick tires there.
All right, fair enough. All right, so let's move into our midfield now. In 12th place, you got Pierre Gasly. In 11th, Alex Albon. 10th, Lance Stroll, getting the first of points for Aston Martin there. K-Mag in 9th. Sebastian Vettel in 8th. Double points finish for Aston Martin. First points all year, so a good finish for them. 7th place, Yuki Tsunoda with an excellent drive there. Charles Leclerc, unfortunately, in 6th place. Valtteri Bottas looking good in 5th. And George Russell, a surprising 4th for the Mercedes. So where do you want to start here, Deanna?
I guess just to briefly mention Gasly, not a good weekend, really bad weekend, I think overall for him. And, I mean, I really can't think of anything this season. It just hasn't felt like the Gasly of the past, 2020, 2021 yet. Qualifying P17. I think this was the first time he got out qualified by Tsunoda, so that wasn't great. Then unfortunately he had the collision with Zhou in the sprint race, got dropped to the back. And then was able to just kind of claw his way back up to 12th. while his teammate, who we'll talk about in a minute, did a really fantastic job, I think, recovering from where he was. So some issues, some self-inflicted, some not. Just really hasn't been a great season overall for him yet.
Yeah, unfortunately, too. Pierre Gasly is an easy one to root for, but rough start here. And then Albon, he's another one. He benefited from the Ocon penalty too, right? Because he finished 12th on track, but 11th here. So just one position out of getting another point for Williams. So I don't know if you can really argue against that as a performance.
His body language looks so much better. When you would the last time you saw him in Formula One from Red Bull to now, I think he's getting on top of that car. And he's letting some of his ability to show through. So, I mean, he got the point last time, one spot short of the points this time, but don't be sleeping on Albon. He'll probably show you something before this year's out.
And imagine if he didn't get disqualified from the qualifying in Australia and if his brakes didn't explode this week. I mean, if he just qualified maybe a couple positions higher than that, maybe he would have been scraping the points or in the points this weekend. So I think he's been doing a really excellent job so far in that Williams that I at this point would kind of put that as easily back of the grid. Or maybe not easily, but it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy to think about Albon and Gasly, get them out of that pressure cooker that is the second seat at Red Bull. And, they can kind of relax and just focus on the driving, what it can do for them. So that's pretty cool. So Lance Stroll in 10th. So got a point. He also made it out of Q1. The shock finish.
The curse of the outlap is alive and well, as we will detail when we get to that part of the show. Yowza. We should not agree on anything.
No, definitely should not. So we'll move up to K-Mag. I kind of say that 9th is disappointing with where he started and what kind of pace he was showing.
I think you can trace this basically back to the sprint race and the decision by Haas to start on the medium tire. It was pretty much softs universally except for 3 people, and 2 out of the 3 were the Haas drivers. I got the strategy. At least on paper, I got it. But these sprint races, as they are right now, are not long enough to necessarily make that thing work. So the medium tire did not fire up enough. I think Kevin tried to drive the wheels off the thing as best he could with what he had, but you're looking at a half a second delta between medium and soft there. So it's trying to fight with one hand behind your back. So I think it comes down to that decision.
All right, and Sebastian Vettel, real good drive, strong drive from him to get 8th place for an Aston Martin that has looked like crap so far this year. So I'll give this one to you guys for Vettel. I got nothing.
I mean, if I had told you that the Aston Martins would score double points, I think people would have taken that bet against me this weekend, and shocking. So, I mean, helped by the rain, but putting the car, I guess, in the good position. We've seen Stroll before have decent form in the wet and changing conditions.
Yep.
And Vettel can do the same thing. I mean, he's obviously got plenty of experience in those conditions. I think that it was that showed well for the Aston Martins this weekend.
Well, he did have a very kind of all over the place, because I think he qualified P9, so first Q3 for Aston Martin, but then sprint race fell all the way back to 13th. But a really great start in this race and leaped all the way to 8th, and then just kind of like passed by, I think, Tsunoda and Leclerc later on. But in the car had not looked that hot so far. It looked pretty rough for them to get double points, and now we have every single team has scored a point. And we're only 4 races in, so that's pretty cool. So I think they are, in fact, at least bunched up at midfield.
Yeah, that is actually pretty cool, because we've had the last couple of years with teams scoring 0 points, so it's nice that everybody's gotten to share in the love this year.
Well, they're all trying. There's not anybody actively saying, look, we really don't care about this season. They're all trying again. There's no tanking in Formula One now.
All right, so let's talk about Yuki Tsunoda, who had an excellent drive today. Deanna, what do you got on his Sunday?
Yeah, so, it started kind of qualified P16, which wasn't fantastic. Both of those AlphaTauris got knocked out in qualifying, I think, because they went out too early in Q1. And then the sprint, he made it all the way up to 12th. on the restart, made it all the way up to kind of ninth once Alonso dropped out, and then just went down and charged down Vettel and K-Mag, which was awesome to see. Was unfortunately passed by Leclerc after he made that mistake. But I think overall, solid recovery, solid performance. And this is just kind of, I think the Tsunoda we thought we were going to get kind of last year. So it's good to see him really having a solid performance like this. So I think excellent weekend for him.
Yeah, big time
good,
recovery from where they qualified on Friday to get up there. So that's moxie and skill, and Yuki brought it and got the most out of the car this weekend. So fair play, good result, good to see.
Yeah, so now we can move up to Charles Leclerc in 6th place, unfortunately. Coming into Sunday, even during the sprint race, I was telling myself that I was cool with him being in 2nd, like I mentioned before, even after leading pretty much the entire thing. So I was like, I'd rather have him start in the same grid position he started the sprint race in, because it worked out so good the first time. It didn't work out so good this morning, unfortunately. Got passed, or he didn't get passed by Max. He couldn't catch up to Max, but he did get passed right away by Sergio and Lando. And the Lando one really hurt because he's a lot slower than the Red Bull. So got held up there. Finally did get past Lando. Was having a pretty good drive, I think. And then I was kind of fighting with myself internally the whole way, whether I wanted him to pit and try and make a move. I wasn't really that concerned about the fastest lap point. I know 1 point can make a lot of a difference. But this early in the season, I didn't think a pit just trying to get the fastest lap was the right move. I was intrigued by maybe pitting and trying to come back and fight Sergio that way. But, ultimately they made the decision to pit, and it didn't work out so good. Put the sauce on, but then just one mistake, and that's really all it takes. And he was in the wall. And thankfully, he was able to get right back on the track. Whether they needed to actually change that wing or not, I don't know, because that kind of cost them too. It looked like it was maybe just the end plate. We've seen guys race without that end plate before and be okay. But that longer pit stop did not help him at all. He dropped down quite a few places, battled back to get to that 6th place. So I was happy to see that, to have that fight and that drive there. But, man, just what could have been this weekend with both Ferrari drivers, with Charles especially. But to take the points he could, just take them and move on. See you in Miami.
It's not a DNF.
Oh.
So
yeah, exactly. And that was my concern when I first saw him.
He only conceded really 7 points when you think about it.
Yeah. And it's like, makes me feel better, I guess. Because when I saw him in the wall, I was just like, there's no way that Ferrari just doubled
way that he hit. I mean, they showed a really nice replay of Yuki's qualifying crash in that same corner from last year, where like if the back end hits that tire barrier, it's game over. But here, I mean, he hit it and he was able to get going again. And in fact, when he did get going again, I didn't even think Lando passed him until I saw the onboard later, and I'm like, okay, he is past him. And then I figured he might just come right back past Lando again, and he'd be right back where he was. But then he dives into the pits. Now, he was complaining, I guess, from his onboard that I went back and said he thought he had damage right away. He definitely wanted, that's a confidence thing on a drying track. So probably the right move to get him into box, change that front wing, send him back out there and let him go. Obviously, he was able to recover somewhat. But, yeah, probably the first real chink in the armor we've seen from Charles Leclerc. But all that being said, he had such the high ground in terms of the math of the points that he had a mulligan. Well, now he's played his mulligan. So now he just doesn't have that. So look at it that way.
Yeah. Deanna, anything on Charles?
No, I think it's the first mistake. So he's been about as flawless as he could be up until this point. And to limit it to not be a DNF where Verstappen's already retired twice. So I think that's, if you're going to do something like that, that was kind of the most positive outcome probably.
Yeah, this is true. All right, so moving on to 5th place, Valtteri Bottas with an awesome drive for Alfa Romeo, finishing in 5th place. Really thought he was going to pass George Russell. It really seemed like he was coming on strong there those last few laps. Couldn't quite get it done. Andy, do you like what you're seeing out of Bottas, out of the shadows that is Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes?
Well, I mean, these are conditions that you would look at and you would say, changing weather, cold, wet, rain, Valtteri Bottas, that probably doesn't add up really well. Except today really did. And it looked like, on Ferrari power and with some confidence and with a car that's probably more set up to the way that he likes. Look at what he did. There's P5. I think it's Alfa Romeo or one of their best, since the Sauber days, since the BMW Sauber days or the Sergio Perez Sauber days when they've been up at that pointy end of the grid. So congrats to Valtteri. I mean, don't forget about him. He's going to play a role in this midfield throughout the season.
Yep. I'm enjoying the kind of Bottas resurgence. I think he had an amazing overtake on, I think it was K-Mag in the middle of this. And I was like, you don't see that. Like, it's been a while since we've seen that. So I kind of think it's fun to see him battling with the seat that he used to have, which is not something we thought we're going to see, and to be able to lead a team. And I think it's really just kind of it all seems very good and positive for Valtteri.
Yeah, I'm not all in on being a Bottas fan, but he's slowly winning me over little by little.
Did you not tweet that if he passed Russell, you would have been? Was that you?
That's yeah, I did. This close. I'm getting close. That one little thing would have been huge. But he didn't yet. The only thing that could have topped that, or that did top that, was Verstappen lapping Hamilton. But we can get to that in a second. Because we still have to talk about one more midfielder, that being George Russell, finishing in fourth place. The only driver finishing the top 5 every race so far this year. Dragging that piece of junk Mercedes to just outside the podium. What do you guys think of his day?
Well, he had one hellacious heck of a start. I think he gains like 5 or 6 places on the first lap. I didn't get a chance to go back and look at that start. I want to, because whatever mapping he had or whatever grip settings he put into that car, it obviously took straight off and got by a lot of players. And this is again to the point about having the high ground with track position here. Is the Mercedes all that great a car here? No, we've seen that through the qualifying and through the sprint. It really wasn't. But once you got track position, it was fast enough to hold off a hard-charging Valtteri Bottas at the end, and to be, even without the adjustment, relatively competitive on terms with the driver in front of him, with Lando in front.
Agreed. Just been really impressive, I think, so far this entire season. Has been nice, consistent. Again, not only driver to be top 5 in every race. So it's been a great start, considering the car is not where he wants it to be, but he's still making the most of it.
All right, very good. So before we get on the podium, we will take a quick break, and then we will be right back to talk about the podium, the driver standings, constructor standings, some predictions, and some fan emails. So come on back. All right, welcome back to Season 4, Episode 13 of the Outlap F1 Podcast, our Imola race review with James, Andy, and Deanna. Welcome back. Quick reminder, our new sponsor, Athletic Greens. You can check them out at www.athleticgreens.com/emerging. Make sure you check them out and use that code. All right, so let's move into the podium finishers now. We're going to start off with a guy named Lando Norris. Andy knows a thing or two about this guy. Andy, on Saturday, I was texting you because I was excited because Lando's former teammate hunted his ass down, passed him. But Lando gets the last laugh and finishes on the podium.
I wanted so bad I didn't know if you'd watch the race. I wanted so bad to text you. It's 4-1 Leclerc versus Lando now. But I held off because I didn't know if you would see it or not. I didn't want to ruin your day prematurely. Being the benefactor of the Leclerc spin was Mr. Norris. But he did have probably one of his better starts in the wet conditions. He did manage to overtake, obviously, Sainz, who spun out, and Leclerc early. He did then concede that position back later on. Looked like it was going to be a solid P4, just kind of keeping his nose clean, staying with the rhythm. another really good McLaren pit stop, 2.2 seconds, if I saw the timing screen right. So that kept him solid in position. It was going to be solid P4, and then Leclerc has the spin, and then it's all of a sudden he's in the podium position. So Leclerc's misfortune is Lando's gain. And hey, if you'd have told me we would have a McLaren podium after that first weekend, I'd have called you crazy. I guess it's not so crazy anymore. So I'll take it.
Yeah, I think it's just an awesome drive from Norris. Very much reminds me of kind of where he was last year, just kind of on that island alone between the top two teams and absolutely everybody else. So just really, really great. And yeah, podium.
That's what I was thinking too, Deanna. It's like since the start of last year, Lando Norris is like the king of lonely races because it seems like he always finds himself in this like spot on the track where it's like he can't quite get to the front, but nobody behind him can touch him. It's just like he's just out there chilling, doing his thing, collecting podiums. So it's pretty impressive day for Lando there. All right, so then top two, we had a 1-2 for Red Bull here. Sergio Perez in second place, Max Verstappen in first. Red Bull flexing their muscle and actually lasting for an entire race. So good things for the boys there in Red Bull, boys and girls there in Red Bull. What do you think about their weekend overall, Andy? Might be a fight.
Sergio, I thought great recovery, considering where he was in qualifying through the sprint and making good, solid, nice, clean moves to get himself up into P2. It didn't really need to pressure Verstappen and didn't necessarily want to. So I think, you see the 16 seconds and it looks like, maybe he's not, pushing, but I'm sure he was, but he didn't necessarily need to. It was going to be a 1-2. They weren't going to flip those cars at that point. And for Max, the weekend that he needed desperately. So after the DNF in Australia, after the DNF in Bahrain, they needed a solid weekend. They got it. Championship is back, at least in range, definitely in the constructors and the drivers. Max is now P2 in the drivers. And it looks like it's 1 and 1A on pace. And it's going to come down to just track-specific stuff between Ferrari and Red Bull, at least. I don't know what the Ferrari upgrade package is or what their schedule is, but as it is right now, it is pick and choose, which one based on the track and the track characteristics, because they're both right there.
Deanna?
Yeah, agreed. I think just really solid weekend for Red Bull. They looked, at least during the race, almost untouchable. I mean, Leclerc was able to kind of stay with Perez within a couple seconds, basically the entire race. I do think it seemed at the moment like a little bit of a risk when they pitted Leclerc for softs to pit Perez, which so I looked at it and I think they had about 13 laps left. They ended up lapping about 2 seconds faster a lap on softs, and he had a 30-second gap. So I think he would have had enough of a buffer in there to be fine had Leclerc not been pushing. But I mean, it got very, very tight. And then I don't know, you don't know what could have happened had Leclerc not bend it on his own. So anyway, that just kind of seemed like a little bit of a risk to me. But once Leclerc was out, he was just kind of.
I actually would have really wanted to see that fight between Checo and Leclerc.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because I thought it would have been spicy.
Yeah, but
yeah,
just kind of
not to be.
Nope.
All right, so we can move in now to our recap of the driver standings. And Dee, I think you have that tonight.
Yes. So leading in the drivers is Charles Leclerc with 86 points, followed by Max Verstappen on 59. In third is Perez with 54, Russell with 49, then Sainz with 38, Norris with 35, Hamilton with 28, Bottas with 24, and Ocon with 20, and Kevin Magnussen in 10th with 15.
Very good. Thank you. For the recap of the team standings, we still have Ferrari in first place with 124 points. But right behind them now, Red Bull Racing with 113, so only 12-point gap there. Mercedes then in third place with 77. McLaren with 46 in fourth. Alfa Romeo in fifth place with 25. Alpine with 22. Alfa Tauri with 16. Haas in eighth place with 15 points. Aston Martin jumps all the way up to ninth place with their 5 points from today. And Williams hanging out in 10th again with one singular point. Andy, before the season started, what would have surprised you more? That we'd be this many races, 3 races in, and I would tell you that George Russell has 21 more points than Lewis Hamilton, or Alfa Romeo was in 5th place. What would be the bigger surprise?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I wouldn't have been shocked with George Russell getting on top of the Mercedes right away, because assuming it was a fundamentally good car. This car doesn't appear to be that. And I think it's more a product of Russell, I think, having more experience being a midfielder right now and understanding kind of how to deal with it.
That's a good point.
And I do think that Mercedes is taking some home run swings on Hamilton's setup, and it's just not coming out, at least right now. And this was always, without an upgraded floor, this was always going to be a tough weekend for Hamilton and Mercedes. And you could just see it in the body language of Toto Wolff and all the interviews he gave throughout the course of the weekend. I think they're just happy to have this weekend done, Hamilton and Wolff, respectively. But Alfa Romeo, off the deck, being led by that, don't forget about him, Mr. Valtteri Bottas. That's impressive. That is dang impressive, because you didn't know how deep the partnership really was with Ferrari, but obviously that Ferrari power unit is very, very fast, and obviously Alfa Romeo have enough resources to put together a decent car.
Yes, sir. All right, Deanna, will you bring us through our fan email?
Yes. Please? One moment. Okay, so starting with Rachel Fleming says, what a result for Bottas. Alpha have got the best out of the driver who seemed broken during parts of 2020 and 2021 for Mercedes. However, will Haas be asking questions about Mick Schumacher yet? A very poor Sunday for him. Maybe he is just cursed at Imola, but K-Mag is getting those points. So this is one thing to point out with the driver standings. So K-Mag is in 10th, and Schumacher is in 19th, and he is one of 2 that have not scored points yet. So I guess, Andy, is there cause for concern?
I think if you're looking at Haas trying to move up in the standings, then maybe. But I still think Mick's very young and very undeveloped. I think today was a big learning experience for him. And I think that eventually through 3/4 of the weekend, this was looking really good for Mick Schumacher to break into the points. Starting in 10th, that was his best position ever. Looked like he was getting on top of things. And for whatever reason, whether it was the rain or, the car didn't work for him the way that he thought, but a spin early cost him big time. And again, if you didn't have track position here, you were really, really behind it. And when that happens, tough to score.
Yeah, I would not be. If I was a Mick Schumacher fan, I would not be that concerned yet. With a name like that, you're going to be kind of like a lefty reliever who can throw strikes. You're going to get a lot of second chances to stick around.
Yeah, and I would honestly just still call this, again, his rookie year after having to deal with that Haas last year and that teammate. So I'm just giving him a clean slate. All right, next up, Scott Hayes says, question, do you think something small is up with Lewis's car, hence the poor performance, because George seems to be doing fine? Any thoughts?
Well, I think we just kind of talked about it. I think they are trying major setup changes on Lewis's car, and I think they're using George's car kind of more as the baseline. Like, okay, we know it's this, and they're letting their more experienced driver be the kind of the experimental one right now to give that good feedback back to the team. And obviously this weekend it did not work. In other at other places they seem to be okay. So I think this specific track layout and this weather condition was the kind of the what is it? The perfect storm, I guess, relatively, for no lack of a better term, for Mercedes and specifically for Lewis Hamilton. Just as I would also say now, Bahrain was the perfect storm for McLaren in that weekend too.
Question about George Russell that I forgot to bring up when we talked about him earlier. Did you guys see the article and some quotes coming out about him and his porpoising issues? He's saying he's giving him back problems and or back pain and chest pain. I don't know if you guys saw that yet. It came out not that long ago.
I did read something about it, and that's not surprising. I mean, that car, I'm not surprised that he's saying that. It looks very much a handful to drive. I'm surprised that Sainz or Leclerc hasn't said something similar too, just because, I mean, it's the same issue. It's just happening in different parts of the track. Because, I mean, I looked at even Leclerc pushing in that sprint race, and I'm like, well, he's pushing because he's bouncing like crazy. And you can tell that he's really on the knife edge there. But, these upgrades to fix that problem, I don't think can come soon enough for both of those cars.
They just need to invest in some very, very good chiropractors.
Yeah, there you go.
That looks painful. Okay, next up, Vikas, sorry for pronouncing that wrong. Sharma says, loved the race, a bit sad for Leclerc. I was really excited for the last 10 laps of the new Ferrari hero versus the Ministry of Defense, but alas, overall, Red Bull deserved the 1-2 and Norris kept his nose clean for the podium. Solid recap.
Yeah, well put.
Agreed.
All right, next up, the Formula with a little car says, literally the best you can get out of Imola. My opinion, though, great event today, great for the championship fight, though it came at a cost for many fans. Yeah, not a great day to be a part of the Tifosi at home.
Yeah, it seemed a lot like all dressed up and then suddenly no place to go. Is what the vibe felt like, at least from the podium. It's like they were all there. It was all these old Ferrari drivers handing out the trophies, and not one of them.
We'll make up for it in Monza.
We'll see. Past couple years have not been great. Okay, next up, JP Economy says, thought the race was spectacular, really competitive. The cars could follow very closely, and it was really fun to watch the battles play out over multiple laps. Any thoughts? I guess that kind of also, if we want to include kind of thoughts on DRS, not DRS, any opinions on that?
So here's my thing with the DRS, and I understand the wanting to have activated it. I mean, obviously, once Crofty says, "Hey, why isn't DRS on?" You know that's going to be a talking point throughout the rest until it is ultimately turned on. But there was a clear dry line, but offline looked really, really wet in a lot of places, and there was still a lot of standing water. And as you saw, even when they did activate it, what overtake got aided with DRS today? In those conditions, not really. There's not one that I can really think of. We saw it in the sprint, but you didn't necessarily see it here. Why? Because it was cold, it was wet, and it was really hard to keep temperature in those tires off the racing line. So I think this is probably a bigger story than it had to be. I'm glad they turned it on when they did, and unfortunately, we only had the one zone, so you didn't have the opportunity for the move and the counter move DRS that we've seen in some of the other circuits.
But I will give at least a little bit of props to the new aero package, because we definitely saw a couple non-DRS overtakes that I don't think would have seen last year or the year before. So I do think we did see, I think there's sometimes the argument of quality versus quantity. I do think we did get a couple on the quality side today.
Yeah. And like, just another good race as far as the regulations go, because I thought there was a lot of really close racing and cars can stay closer to each other without killing their tires and everything. So I continue to really enjoy that. And it's like, even if there's not a lot of overtaking, just the amount of pressure that they're putting on the car in front of them and that driver being able to handle that. Like, I mean, at any moment, you could be like CharlesLeclerc and make one mistake and, you're dropping through the standings now. So to be able to be racing with somebody that's right on your ass for that long and not make a mistake, especially in the conditions like today, I mean, that just goes to show how good of professional drivers these guys really are.
Agreed. Okay, so next up, Glibmore says, gloomy San Marino shaped cloud with a papaya lining. What a dull race. Something is very wrong. The new ground effect cars are designed to follow each other. The end. We now thoroughly rely on DRS to inject any kind of excitement to some of these bland tracks. What was the point of completely changing the regs just to watch DRS trains and to listen to commentators begging for DRS to be activated? So
I would say this is the other side of the coin. And I guess my response to that would be, I think we did see cars, and we just kind of said it earlier, were able to follow. They were able to put pressure. It wasn't they would get into that wall of air that you would see last year and they just couldn't do anything. there was moves attempted. Lots of moves were attempted. Pulling one off required one superior pace, superior tire temperature, and a willingness to almost crash yourself to do it. And you didn't see a whole lot of that, especially in the midfield. Now, that I think is a product of, one, the cost cap, and two, spare parts. This is something that I don't know that is getting really, really talked about, but it's an issue. I mean, Aston Martin, if they had in Australia, if they had any more crashes that weekend, they were done. They could not have fielded a race car. They had nothing else to put on it. So, this is not the era of we just keep throwing parts at a car, Formula One anymore. They have to be measured in their moves, and I think you're seeing that in some of the racecraft, especially in a place like here. And we really only had the one dry line for a majority of the race. And so I'm not giving up on these regs just yet. I think we saw a positive. This race was always going to be tough in terms of overtaking. There's one DRS zone, and the cars are still just as wide as they were last year. I mean, that's physics.
And I mean, the best race to probably, or one of the best races to ever happen on this track was 2005. Alonso with Schumacher chasing him, and just Schumacher for laps and laps and laps could not get past, and Alonso was able to hold on. And that's, I think, just kind of how this track is designed. I think there's only so much you can look into. I think the era rules for something like this weekend, especially kind of seeing how it's worked on the other tracks this year.
I think maybe I found my new nemesis since I'm Mr. Positivity now. This guy seems to be pretty much all about negativity, and I don't appreciate that. So.
All right, and our final fan email is along the same lines. Jenny Donahue just says, boring, with an exclamation point.
I think, now, to be fair, Jenny's probably struggling right now, much like Andy and John are too. The White Sox are terrible and in a terrible streak of baseball. So I'm sure that's bleeding into her F1 racing weekend as well. So I can understand where you're coming from, Jenny.
I didn't even watch the game today because I'm not doing this. After the Bulls binned it again, I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm taking a nap before I get ready for tonight.
All right. Thank you for the emails there. Everybody that sent one in, please keep sending those in. We love to get them, and we love to talk about them. So keep doing that. All right, so we'll move on to our weekly awards part of the show. And as always, we start with rubbish. We had John type some in here, so I'll do his. First up, John says, sprint weekend needs updating. The loss of free practice hurts the show. Mercedes, their setup, shit car, pit stops. Race director forget DRS and makes a shit race even worse. So John is right in line with the terrible race crowd. Mr. Negativity himself. And then, Andy, what do you got for your rubbish?
My rubbish is about the sprint format, but it's a little bit different. It's the overhyping of the format over this weekend. Yes, the sprint was fun, and we should have enjoyed that. But it doesn't have to be like now we have like 12 of these things. It goes back to my cinnamon analogy earlier. A little bit can add spice and flavor. I think the Friday qualifying was fun. I didn't love the time of the day that it was, but that's my issue. But too much of it, like if we do this every other weekend, it's going to get old. It's going to get old fast, and people are going to game it and figure out. You're going to end up with the same types of grids that you see everywhere else. So I know they are. F1 and Liberty are trying to hype this format. I just urge caution. Let's see what the other two with these cars in not weird changeable conditions give us, and then let's make that determination.
Very good, Andy. Deanna, what do you got for rubbish?
I also kind of agree that I don't love sprint races, but I'm going to go somewhere else, and I kind of feel bad about this, but I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton. I think anybody else on the grid, any other team pairing, if you see on the road finishing 10 spots behind your teammate, where, I mean, there was the issue with the pit stop, but you had Russell making the most of that weekend where Hamilton just couldn't. I don't know what the issue is, or I'm sure it's a combination of a bunch of things. The car isn't great, but it was a rough performance. I think he qualified about 4/10 behind Russell in the end, and it was just kind of a mess of a weekend. You're welcome, James.
You start the year with predicting greatness for Ferrari, and now you've moved into bashing Lewis Hamilton.
I feel bad. I feel really bad, but I don't know where else to go. Honorable mention, I love Gasly more than anything, but that was an awful weekend for him too. So
Yeah.
I'm just so proud right now. I need to take a second. Like my thoughts here. I've never been so happy to have somebody steal my rubbish award. So, I was going to go Lewis Hamilton as well. Just a weekend to forget for him. And, George Russell's figuring it out. So, I don't know. Maybe, Andy, that was actually a good point you had earlier. Maybe they're trying some crazy shit on Lewis's car to get the feedback from him. Maybe.
There was a sensor. There was a light that you could see in Australia that was on Lewis's car that wasn't on George's. So I do think they are using Lewis for some setup work. And I
am thankful for his struggles, though, because it gives me things to laugh at on Twitter as all the LH Army thinks of all the reasons why their Lord and Savior is struggling. So that gives me a few giggles on Twitter. All right, so analysis paralysis. Got a bad feeling this is going to be like an analysis paralysis of old. So we'll start with John, and he says Ferrari get their award back. Yes, this award was initially kind of owned by Ferrari for the first probably season of doing this podcast. But he said, although I probably would have done the same, just unlucky today. Andy, where are you at with this one?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm not going to give it to Ferrari, I would give it to Ricciardo for the hard tire on a cold track. How does that work? But I'll give it to Ferrari. They took a page from basically the Red Bull playbook with the late tire change. I admired actually the move. It injected a bit of something into the race that really didn't have a whole lot at the time, but it just bit him in the end because obviously Leclerc makes one little jink and it bit him. So don't know, but that's a strategy thing. But you almost wonder if they didn't do that, would it have not even mattered?
Yeah.
I feel like he had, I think, about 2 or 3 seconds to Perez. Like, I feel like he would have continued to push, but I fully agree with Ferrari and where they were going on that strategy call. It was Leclerc. He had just gotten out of DRS, was trying desperately to get back in it because he kind of saw that door closing, and that's when he made the mistake. So I think, if anything, I would more lean on that particular decision to give it to Red Bull because they had track position and they had a really decent gap back to Leclerc. But my one is Ricciardo. It's easily Ricciardo. He was within a second of Hamilton, and then they pit him on lap 30 for whatever reason to go onto hards. He at one point had about 15 seconds to show Latifi Schumacher, and then he ended 20 seconds behind Schumacher, who was another 20 seconds behind Latifi, and it was just awful and bad and just very sad. And the hards was not the move.
Another home run strategy that just wasn't going to work, and I don't understand the thought behind it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a little bit torn on it, but I guess I'll go with the low-hanging fruit and say Ferrari, even though, I was okay with the decision when they made it. They probably make it again, I guess. Just one small mistake kind of cost them there. So, all right, dark horse for today. Deanna, you can start this one off. We got.
I'm going to go with George Russell finishing 4th, starting P11. Excellent start to get himself up into 6th in a car that had looked a bit of a mess. So there's my kind of other side of the coin with Russell there.
All right. And Andy?
Valtteri Bottas and a P5 in conditions that used to absolutely give him fits when he was in a Mercedes car. So well done, Valtteri. Like I keep telling everybody, don't forget about him. It's going to make the midfield competitive this year.
All right, and John simply has the ass man, which we all know is Valtteri Bottas. For mine, I could definitely see the Bottas argument there. I almost went with him. Definitely could see the George Russell. I'm going to give it to Lando Norris to get in the podium there. That, like Andy said, there's no way you would have believed anybody if we tried to tell you that he was going to have a podium especially within this short amount of time.
Right.
Like the way they started to be there. That's dark horse for sure. All right, so we'll move on to driver of the day. John has Max Verstappen. Says league of his own in race trim, which I'd have to agree with today. Andy, who do you got?
I'm going to give this to Sergio Perez for just the overall weekend and the recovery drive through the sprint and a solid P2. The rear gunners for Red Bull and Ferrari are going to matter. And in this case, Red Bull got back into it mainly because of the efforts of one Sergio Perez.
All right, I'm going to go with Max Verstappen. Just crushed it the whole weekend. Didn't put a foot wrong. Deanna, who you got?
I have a lot of nominations. I feel like Norris, Russell, Bottas, Tsunoda, Vettel, I think all had fantastic weekends. Just kind of as a whole, even though that is most of the top 10. Same with Perez, but it has to go to Verstappen, kind of clawing back, having the perfect weekend. There's literally just about nothing he did wrong, bar the start on the sprint race, but he even made up for that himself. So just completely untouchable this weekend for the most part.
Yep. All right. So for prediction results, Andy, tell me how bad it was.
Yes, the like I said before, the curse of the outlap is alive and well because I don't think we had any actual results other than the ones that we were going to get points for anyway. So John finished the weekend with 2 points. He had the pole sitter being Max Verstappen, and he had Max as the sprint winner, so he gets 2 for that. I got 2 points. I had the fastest lap driver being Max Verstappen, and the fastest lap overall lap time. James, you got 1 point. For Max Verstappen, this was your hedge as the sprint winner, and that at least gets you on the board, but nothing else, unfortunately. And Deanna got 2 points, 1 for the qualifying lap time, and she also got the sprint winner as well. So it's 2-2 and 2 for John, me, and Deanna, and 1 for you, James. In terms of the overall, John continues to lead with 11, Deanna right on his tail at 10, and you and I, sir, are now tied for, I guess, P3 on 8 points apiece.
All right, well, I'll start thinking about what extra 3 bonus picks I'll go with in a couple weeks here. All right, so yeah, as I just mentioned, we'll be in Miami, Florida in 2 weeks' time for the first Miami Grand Prix. Race preview on Wednesday, race review Sunday night. Super pumped for that one. We've seen a lot of videos of the track getting painted a really, really cool shade of, I guess, is that like a blue?
It's teal.
Good with colors.
It's the old 90s teal.
Yeah, I love it. I like that color a lot. Haven't seen any progress on getting any boats in the middle or yachts in the middle of the track, so we'll see what happens there.
Well, they're waiting for the F1 cranes to come, lift the car up, lift the boat up.
So yeah, I mean, anybody that's there that listens to the show, make sure you send us some pictures. Let us know how you thought they did with the first time going there. I know the expectations are probably pretty high because the tickets were very
It should be for what you had to pay to get in. Let's put it that way.
Especially if you bought on the resale market.
Oh my god! Just like the general admission for Sunday or whatever was like a crazy price I saw.
It's like $300 just for GA
for one day.
Yeah. They were selling them as a package. It was $900.
I think it was just weekend. Friday and then just weekend.
Yeah,
right?
Now they're doing just
like
Friday and just Sunday, just Saturday now.
Yeah. You know what? If people are going to pay it, then that's what the price is. So I can't fault them for that. I guess just a bummer, but. Well, I guess we're going to start saving up for Vegas now because I don't think those prices are going to be any cheaper.
Yeah, we still don't have a Vegas date, and I would imagine the second that date comes out, book your hotel. Even if you don't know that you're going, book a hotel. You can always cancel it.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty wild. But yeah, so we'll be off for a weekend. I'm sure we'll all enjoy that.
Yeah, we're going to do our best to have as much close to wall-to-wall coverage. I'm going to try to do my best to do as many things as I can live, at least on Twitter and some other places. So I'm hopefully I'm going to be able to actually take that Friday off of work and just totally just dive into this weekend because when the F1 show comes to town, we got to step up. So that's my plan.
Good deal. I think that's all we got for tonight. So thanks for listening. We'll talk to you in about a week and a half. Deanna, Andy, it's always fun with you two. And why don't you send us off there, Andy?
Yeah, as always, may all your laps be fast.